Nobody taught you the true meaning of seek first the kingdom of God. They told you it was about religion, about piety, about doing good so you could earn heaven. But the kingdom of God is not a place to arrive at after death. It is the living presence within you, here and now. It is the awareness of God as the very life that animates you, the intelligence that breathes you, the love that sustains you. To seek the kingdom is not to travel outward into the world of appearances. It is to turn inward, into the quiet center of your being where the infinite whispers, "Be still and know that I am God." You have sought peace in possessions, in relationships, in power, in knowledge, and still the heart remains restless. Why? Because the outer world is only the shadow of reality. The kingdom is the substance, the invisible source from which all form arises. When you seek that first, before ambition, before security, before self, you align yourself with the rhythm of divine order. Life then begins to unfold, not by struggle, but by grace. Do not imagine that seeking the kingdom means retreating from the world. It means seeing through the illusion of separation while living fully in the world. When you behold the presence of God in every face, in every circumstance, in every moment, you are living in the kingdom. You are no longer reacting from fear, but responding from love. You cease striving for supply because you realize you are the expression of infinite abundance. You stop begging for healing because you awaken to the fact that wholeness is your nature. The secret is this: the kingdom of God is consciousness, the awareness of divine completeness within. The moment you realize this, you are free. You no longer chase after things. They begin to appear as natural expressions of your inner harmony. The world outside mirrors the peace found within. To seek first the kingdom is to know that all that is good, all that is true, all that endures, flows from this inner realization. The kingdom is not to be gained. It is to be revealed. It has been within you all along, waiting for your recognition. And when you find it, you discover that you were never seeking God at all. It was God seeking himself through you. The kingdom of God is within you. It is not a distant place or future reward, but the living divine presence already dwelling in your consciousness, waiting to be recognized. Seeking the kingdom means turning inward. True seeking is an inward journey into stillness and awareness, where one perceives the infinite rather than chasing external conditions or possessions. Life flows by grace, not struggle. When you align with divine order through inner awareness, life unfolds harmoniously and effortlessly, without the need for fear-driven striving. The kingdom transforms perception. Living in the kingdom is seeing God in all things and all people, responding to life through love and oneness rather than through separation or fear. The kingdom is consciousness realized. The great revelation is that you are not acquiring something new, you are awakening to what has always been yours, divine completeness expressing itself through you. The kingdom of God is within you. These words have echoed through centuries, yet few have stopped to realize their living truth. Humanity has searched outward for fulfillment, for heaven, for meaning, for peace, as though the divine were somewhere beyond the horizon, hidden behind clouds or time. But the mystery has never been distant. It is closer than breath, nearer than thought, resting quietly at the center of your own being. The mind, absorbed in the outer play of form, overlooks the still presence that sustains it. We have been conditioned to believe that God is apart from us, to be approached through rituals, doctrines, or intercessors. Yet all along, the divine essence waits within, not as an idea but as the very life that animates you. When you begin to sense this truth, a sacred shift occurs. The restless search for external validation starts to dissolve. The noise of the world, with its promises of happiness through possessions or approval, loses its power. You start to understand that everything you have ever longed for, peace, love, security, joy, was not meant to be found in the changing outer realm. These are not things to acquire, they are qualities of the presence within, eternally complete and self-sustaining. The kingdom of God is the awareness of that presence, the realization that you are inseparable from it, that it is your true identity. This awakening does not come through effort or discipline in the ordinary sense. It comes through quiet recognition, through surrender of the mind's constant grasping. You do not attain the kingdom, you uncover it. You peel away the layers of fear, desire, and self-image until what remains is pure being. In that stillness, you find that the divine life is not something you experience occasionally, but the very essence of every moment. The sun that rises, the air that fills your lungs, the beating of your heart, all are expressions of that same infinite reality. To live with this awareness is to live in freedom. You no longer feel driven by the outer world's shifting currents, the opinions of others, the success or failure of circumstances, the loss or gain of possessions. These no longer define your sense of self. You know that what you are cannot be increased by praise or diminished by rejection. You are rooted in something changeless, an inner sanctuary that the world cannot touch. The kingdom of God within becomes your foundation, and from that center all action flows naturally, harmoniously, and without struggle. This realization does not remove you from the world, it deepens your participation in it. When you know the kingdom within, you meet others not as competitors or strangers, but as reflections of the same divine life. Every encounter becomes sacred because you see through appearances to the truth beneath. Love ceases to be a sentiment, it becomes the natural recognition of unity. Compassion arises effortlessly because you no longer perceive separation. You begin to see that there is only one life, expressing itself in countless forms. The discovery of the kingdom within is the end of fear. Fear exists only when we believe ourselves to be separate, vulnerable beings struggling in an uncertain world. But when you know that the life within you is the same life that sustains all creation, you rest in trust. You know that whatever unfolds in time is guided by an intelligence beyond the mind's understanding. You cease to resist life, and in that surrender, peace flows like a river. The outer world may continue to change, but your inner awareness remains still and radiant. To know that the kingdom of God is within you is to awaken from the dream of separation. It is to recognize that you have never been apart from the infinite, never lacking, never lost. The journey was never toward God, it was always toward awareness. The treasure you sought was hidden in the field of your own heart, and it shines now, eternal and unchanging, waiting only for your acknowledgement. To seek the kingdom of God is not to look for a distant realm beyond the stars, nor to wait for a reward promised in some future time. It is an inward turning, a quiet movement of awareness from the noise of the senses to the stillness of the spirit within. Humanity has been trained to seek fulfillment outwardly, to chase after possessions, relationships, recognition, and even spiritual experiences, as though peace could be achieved by arranging the outer world to our liking. Yet no matter how much is gained, the longing persists. The heart remains unsatisfied because it is searching in the wrong direction. The true seeking begins when one finally turns inward, realizing that the source of all that is good and enduring lies not in form, but in consciousness itself. The inward journey is not about withdrawing from life, but about awakening to a deeper dimension of it. When you seek the kingdom within, you are not abandoning the world, you are seeing through its illusions. You begin to perceive that every object, every event, every person is but a temporary expression of an invisible life force that never ceases. To seek inwardly is to attune yourself to that unseen presence, to rest your attention upon the reality behind appearances. It is to be still enough to hear the gentle voice that has been speaking to you all along. The voice that whispers, not in words, but in peace. The mind will resist this inward movement, for it has been conditioned to seek outward stimulation and achievement. It will tell you that stillness is unproductive, that you must keep striving to secure your place in the world. But the mind is only an instrument. It cannot lead you to the kingdom because it lives in duality. The kingdom is found only in the silence beyond thought, where the personal self dissolves and only pure awareness remains. When you enter that silence, even for a moment, you begin to feel the reality of your divine nature. It is a state beyond effort, beyond desire, beyond fear. It is not something you create, but something you remember. To seek inwardly is to practice surrender, not resignation, but release of the false sense of control. You cease trying to force life into the shape of your personal will, and instead allow divine intelligence to unfold through you. This surrender is not weakness, it is trust in the greater order that sustains all things. When you no longer fight the flow of life, you begin to live in harmony with it. This harmony expresses itself as peace, clarity, and effortless action. You find yourself doing what needs to be done, yet without the strain of anxiety or ambition. You act, but it is no longer the limited I acting. It is the infinite life expressing itself through you. As the awareness of the inner kingdom deepens, your perception of the world changes. You begin to see that nothing is truly separate from you, for the same presence that lives in your heart lives in all creation. The trees, the sky, the people around you, all are movements of the same divine consciousness. You realize that the search for love was never about finding another person to complete you. It was about awakening to the love that is your very essence. The search for peace was never about changing conditions. It was about finding the stillness that was always there beneath the surface of thought. This inward seeking brings freedom. The burdens you once carried, the fears, the regrets, the endless striving, begin to dissolve as you rest more deeply in the awareness of God's presence within. You come to see that every challenge is an invitation to return to that center, to remember who you are. No outer circumstance can give or take away the peace that flows from this realization. The more you abide in it, the more the outer world reflects it back to you. Life becomes an unfolding of grace, a continuous revelation of the kingdom that was never lost, only forgotten. Life flows by grace, not by struggle. Yet humanity has been taught from birth that only through effort, striving, and control can we secure peace, success, or happiness. We have been told that to survive is to compete, to fight against circumstances, to force outcomes by the strength of will. But such living is heavy. It binds the soul to endless labor. True life begins when one surrenders the belief that everything depends upon personal effort and recognizes that there is a deeper rhythm at work, a divine intelligence moving all things in perfect order. When this realization dawns, the heart relaxes and the current of grace begins to carry you effortlessly where you are meant to be. Grace is not something earned. It is not a reward for good behavior or religious devotion. It is the natural expression of divine harmony already present within the universe. When you live in alignment with that harmony, your life begins to unfold in a way that feels effortless, guided, and inspired. This does not mean that challenges disappear. Rather, your relationship to them transforms. Instead of meeting them with resistance, you meet them with trust. You no longer struggle to bend life to your will. You allow life to express its will through you. What once seemed like obstacles now reveal themselves as stepping stones arranged by an unseen hand. The struggle ends the moment you realize that you are not the doer. The same life that causes the sun to rise and the flowers to bloom also animates you. It breathes through you, thinks through you, and acts through you. When you stop trying to manage the universe and instead become a conscious instrument of that power, you move with grace. Actions still occur, but they are born from stillness rather than anxiety. Decisions arise not from calculation, but from intuition, an inner knowing that needs no explanation. The energy that once went into striving now becomes the quiet strength of trust. Living by grace does not mean passivity or inaction. It means inspired action, free from the bondage of fear and personal desire. You still work, love, create, and serve, but you do so as an expression of the divine rhythm, not as an attempt to secure something for yourself. The motive shifts from "how can I make this happen?" to "how can I allow the infinite to express through me?" This change of consciousness turns every task, however small, into a sacred act. Even the ordinary becomes luminous when performed from this awareness. When you live by grace, synchronicities begin to appear. The right people, opportunities, and circumstances come into your life with an ease that defies logic. It is not magic, nor coincidence. It is the natural result of alignment. The universe mirrors your inner state. When you live in resistance and fear, life feels hard, fragmented, and uncertain. When you live in trust and surrender, life becomes whole, fluid, and complete. The difference is not in what happens, but in how you perceive and respond to it. Grace flows wherever there is openness. It cannot enter a heart closed by fear or control. To live in this way requires faith, not faith in doctrines or promises, but faith in the living presence that sustains you. It means learning to rest in the unknown, to trust that what unfolds is guided by wisdom beyond your understanding. You discover that even what seems painful or chaotic carries hidden blessings, for grace moves not only through joy, but also through difficulty. Every experience becomes part of the divine orchestration that leads you closer to awareness of the kingdom within. The end of struggle is not the end of life's movement, it is the end of resistance to that movement. When you yield to the current of divine grace, life becomes a flowing river, effortless in its direction and sure of its destination. You find yourself doing less, yet accomplishing more. You no longer live from tension but from peace, no longer from fear but from quiet confidence. Everything you once chased begins to arrive of its own accord, not because you have earned it, but because you have learned to live in harmony with the infinite that has always carried you. When the awareness of the kingdom dawns within you, your perception of life is utterly transformed. You no longer see a fragmented world filled with separate beings struggling for existence. You begin to perceive a single divine presence expressing itself in countless forms. Every face, every sound, every movement becomes part of the living wholeness of God. What once seemed ordinary begins to glow with quiet beauty. You no longer look upon people as strangers or adversaries, but as reflections of the same sacred life that breathes through you. The walls of separation, built by fear and judgment, begin to crumble, and in their place arises a deep compassion that does not need to be learned, it simply is. This transformation does not occur through moral effort or intellectual understanding. It unfolds naturally when the heart becomes still enough to behold the presence behind appearances. When you live in the awareness of God, you no longer react to the world from the narrow perspective of the ego. You see beyond the masks of personality, beyond the temporary roles that people play, and recognize the divine essence shining within them. Even those who appear unkind or lost are not outside this presence, they are simply unaware of it. When you see this, love ceases to be conditional. You love not because of what others do, but because you see who they truly are, expressions of the same infinite self that lives within you. In this state of awareness, life becomes a continuous revelation. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, becomes an opportunity to witness the presence of God in action. You begin to understand that nothing happens by chance, and that every encounter is a mirror showing you more of yourself. The world outside is no longer something to control or escape, but a sacred classroom through which consciousness expands. You meet conflict with understanding, suffering with compassion, and uncertainty with faith, for you know that beneath all appearances, divine order reigns. The same intelligence that orchestrates the stars is guiding every detail of your life. When you behold the world through the eyes of spirit, fear loses its hold. Fear arises only from the illusion of separation, from the belief that you are a vulnerable self surrounded by forces that can harm you. But when you perceive the divine in all things, you realize that there is nothing to defend, nothing to conquer, nothing to fear. You live in the awareness that God is not somewhere apart, watching from a distance, but present in the midst of every circumstance. Even what seems dark or chaotic is not outside the divine order. It is simply the shadow cast by the mind's limited vision. As awareness deepens, even the shadow reveals its hidden light. This perception transforms your actions. You no longer act from desire to get or to keep, but from the quiet joy of giving. Service becomes natural, because you see that serving another is serving the self. Forgiveness becomes effortless, for you understand that no one has ever truly wronged you. All are playing their part in the unfolding of divine consciousness. You live without resistance, moving with the flow of life instead of against it. What once felt burdensome becomes light, for you carry nothing but love in your heart. To live in this awareness is to live in freedom. You still walk among people, work, create, and fulfill responsibilities, but inwardly you remain at peace. The outer world may continue its movement of gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, yet none of it disturbs the quiet center within you. You become a witness, resting in the stillness of divine presence, even as the waves of life rise and fall. The more you live from this center, the more your outer world reflects that harmony. People are drawn to you not because of what you say, but because they feel the peace that radiates from your being. You become, without trying, a channel through which divine love flows into the world, silently reminding others of the kingdom that has always been within them too. The kingdom of God is not a distant realm to be reached, nor a prize to be earned through devotion or good deeds. It is consciousness realized, the awakening to the divine completeness already present within your own being. Every soul carries this infinite reality, but few recognize it, because attention is consumed by the external world of form, thought, and desire. The great secret is that nothing needs to be added to you, nothing is missing. The divine is not something to acquire, it is something to uncover. Beneath the surface of the restless mind lies a still and luminous awareness that has never been touched by fear, guilt, or time. That awareness is the kingdom. To realize the kingdom is to awaken from the dream of separation. The mind has woven countless stories about who you are, your name, your history, your successes and failures. But these are only garments of identity. They belong to the outer self, not the essence. The divine consciousness within you does not strive or suffer, it simply is. It does not come and go, it is eternal presence, changeless and complete. When you turn inward and become still, you begin to sense this deeper life. It is not an emotion or an idea, it is pure being. In that awareness, you know that you have never been apart from God, for God is not a being outside you, but the very life that you are. As this realization deepens, your entire sense of existence transforms. You cease trying to improve or perfect yourself, for you understand that the divine cannot be improved, it can only be recognized. The search that once drove you ceases, not because you have given up, but because you have found what you were seeking. The longing that once felt like emptiness reveals itself as the call of spirit, drawing you back to the remembrance of your own completeness. The peace that seemed distant becomes the natural atmosphere of your consciousness. You no longer chase after happiness, because you have discovered that happiness is your nature. You no longer seek love, because you realize you are the expression of infinite love itself. This inner realization does not remove you from the world, it allows you to live in it with freedom and clarity. When you know yourself as divine consciousness, the world appears as a play of forms arising and dissolving within that awareness. You no longer cling to what comes, nor resist what goes. You engage with life wholeheartedly, yet without bondage, because you know that nothing can add to or diminish your essence. Possessions, titles, relationships, even the body itself, these may change, but the awareness that knows them remains. Untouched, you begin to live from that awareness, not as an isolated individual, but as a vessel through which the infinite expresses itself. The realization of the kingdom as consciousness brings about a quiet joy that is not dependent on circumstance. It is a joy that flows from within, steady and unshaken. Even in moments of pain or uncertainty, a deeper peace remains, for you know that beneath every appearance lies the same divine presence. You no longer divide life into good or bad, success or failure. You see all as movements of the same wholeness. This does not make you indifferent, it makes you compassionate, for you see that all beings are expressions of the same self, each on their own path toward remembrance. The discovery of the kingdom within marks the end of the illusion that you are seeking something outside yourself. You realize that the seeker and the sought are one. Every prayer, every act of longing was the divine calling you home to your own being. You have never been separate from God, you were only unaware. When that awareness dawns, life becomes an effortless unfolding of grace. The kingdom is no longer an aspiration, it is the living reality of your consciousness. You walk in the world, but you belong to eternity. Everything you do, say, or touch becomes an expression of that inner fullness, for the kingdom of God, long hidden, is now revealed as the radiant truth of your own existence. When the heart awakens to the truth that the kingdom of God is not something to be reached, but something to be revealed, life takes on a new rhythm. A rhythm of peace, trust, and quiet wonder. The search that once drove you through the outer world ends in stillness, and in that stillness you discover that the divine was never absent, never waiting to be found. It was within you, breathing as you, guiding you, loving you through every moment of your journey. The veil of separation dissolves, and you stand where you have always been, at the very center of God's presence. No longer do you strive to make life perfect, you allow life to unfold as the perfect expression of divine order. No longer do you plead for light, you recognize that the light has always been shining from within. The seeking ends, but the revelation begins, an eternal unfolding of awareness in which you see the sacred in all things, the infinite in the ordinary, and the timeless in each passing moment. And when that awareness becomes your way of being, you realize the mystery that was hidden in plain sight. You were never searching for God. It was God who was living, moving, and seeking through you, so that through your awakening, he might behold his own reflection. Beloved, the voice of the Christ within is not far away, nor is it hidden from those who seek it with a sincere heart. It speaks in the silence, in the stillness that lies beneath the noise of the mind. To hear it, one must first turn from the clamor of the outer world and rest in the quiet sanctuary of the soul. For the Christ does not shout, it whispers, and only the attuned ear can perceive its gentle word. The first step is receptivity. You must be willing to listen without demand. Let your prayer be not a plea, but an openness, an empty cup waiting to be filled. Silence the questioning, the striving, and let the infinite speak through the calmness of your being. When you stop asking for signs and instead become still, revelation begins to flow like a clear stream from an unseen spring. The second step is acknowledgement. Recognize that the Christ within is already present. It does not need to be summoned or created. It is the living presence, eternal, complete, and radiant within you. Each time you remember this, the veil of separation grows thinner, and the inner light becomes more discernible. The third step is communion. Withdraw your thought from the outer world, not as an escape, but as a return to your source. Sit quietly, breathe softly, and feel the rhythm of life moving within you. Do not think about God. Rather, let yourself be in God. This is the sacred meeting place where human thought dissolves and divine awareness rises. The fourth step is trust. Do not doubt the reality of what is unseen, even when no word is spoken, even when the silence seems empty. Trust that the presence is there, guiding, teaching, unfolding. The inner voice is often softer than thought, yet more powerful than reason. The fifth step is expression. Let the awareness of the Christ flow through your words, your deeds, your compassion. For the voice you hear within seeks manifestation without. As you live in harmony with this presence, it will speak through your kindness, your patience, your peace. And then, in a holy moment, you will know that you and the Christ are one. There is no longer a listener and a voice, only the infinite speaking to itself in the language of love. Receptivity opens the door to spirit. True hearing begins in stillness and surrender. One must release striving and allow divine wisdom to flow naturally into a quiet, receptive heart. The Christ presence is already within. The divine voice is not something to be sought outside, but recognized as the eternal living presence already dwelling in the soul. Communion transcends thought. Connection deepens when one moves beyond intellectual prayer into silent communion, being in God rather than thinking about God. Trust the unseen guidance. Faith in the invisible is essential. Even in silence, the divine is actively guiding, teaching, and transforming the consciousness from within. Expression manifests the inner voice, the true evidence of hearing. The Christ within is revealed through daily living in love, gentleness, patience, and peace expressed outwardly. Receptivity is the sacred threshold through which the divine voice enters the human consciousness. It is not achieved through effort, nor through the strain of mental pursuit, but through a quiet yielding of self. The mind, so accustomed to doing, fixing, analyzing, must learn to be still, to rest in a state of open awareness, where thought no longer seeks control. In this stillness, a deeper intelligence begins to move, one that is not born of intellect, but of spirit. To be receptive is to create space within, to make room for the infinite to express itself without obstruction. When one is truly receptive, there is no expectation, no agenda. The soul waits in peace, not asking, "What shall I receive?" but rather, "What would the divine have me know?" It is an act of surrender, a gentle release of personal will. Many approach prayer or meditation as a means to acquire guidance, healing, peace, but receptivity is not acquisition. It is the awareness that all these things already exist in the presence, and that by quieting the self, we allow them to unfold naturally. Like the ocean tide that comes unbidden, the spirit flows in when resistance subsides. The noise of the world, both outer and inner, is the greatest barrier to receptivity. The mind chatters about yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's fears, creating a fog that clouds perception. To hear the still, small voice, one must enter the inner chamber and close the door, not a physical door, but the door of mental activity. In that sanctuary of silence, thought becomes transparent, and what remains is awareness itself. It is here that the Christ within speaks, not in words, but in the subtle language of peace. Receptivity is cultivated by love for the presence. It cannot be forced, but it can be invited through devotion. when the heart longs not for results, but for communion. The divine voice answers effortlessly. Imagine a flower turning toward the light. It does not struggle to bloom, it simply receives. So too, the soul opens in the warmth of divine love, and revelation blossoms naturally. This love dissolves fear, for where love is, resistance cannot stand. And in the absence of fear, the spirit moves freely through consciousness. It is often believed that hearing the divine voice requires some mystical talent or heightened state of spirituality. Yet the truth is simple. Every soul possesses the capacity to hear. What differs is the level of receptivity. The voice of the Christ is ever present, but only those who are inwardly still can perceive its whisper. Just as radio waves fill the air but require a tuned receiver to be heard, the divine message surrounds us, waiting for a heart attuned to silence. The process is one of alignment, not effort. The more we rest in stillness, the clearer the signal becomes. To be receptive also means to trust. The mind may question the silence, "Why do I hear nothing?" Yet the Spirit speaks even in quiet. The communication of the divine is not always through words or visions. Sometimes it is an inner knowing, a peace that surpasses reason. Trust allows us to remain open even when no answer seems to come. It teaches patience, the willingness to dwell in silence without demand. In that patient waiting, understanding unfolds, not as a sudden flash, but as a gradual illumination of consciousness. Practicing receptivity in daily life transforms ordinary moments into sacred ones. When we pause before speaking, when we listen deeply to another without judgment, when we move through the world aware of divine presence in all things, we are living receptively. The Christ voice does not speak only in meditation. It speaks through intuition, through the quiet prompting to act with kindness, through the inspiration that arises unbidden in the heart. To be receptive is to live in a continuous awareness that every breath may carry a divine message. Receptivity demands humility. The ego, with its need to be right, to control, to understand, must step aside. For the divine cannot be heard through arrogance or fear. It reveals itself to the meek and pure in heart. When we admit, "I do not know, but I am willing to be shown," we place ourselves in the position of the listener. The Christ consciousness responds to such openness as sunlight responds to the dawn. The light has always been there, only the night of self-concern obscured it. There is a rhythm to divine communication, a movement of giving and receiving. Receptivity allows this rhythm to flow unhindered. Just as the lungs expand to take in air and contract to release it, so the soul receives inspiration and then expresses it in thought, word, and deed. To hold on to what we receive is to block the current. To share it freely is to remain in harmony with divine flow. Thus, receptivity becomes not a passive waiting, but a living participation in the life of spirit. In this way, the soul learns to listen without strain, to wait without anxiety, to know without proof. The more we surrender our need to control the process, the more naturally the inner voice is heard. Receptivity is not a state we achieve once and for all, but a way of being cultivated moment by moment, a quiet attentiveness to the divine that is forever whispering within. The Christ within is not something to be discovered as though hidden in a distant place, nor something to be attained through years of seeking. It is the eternal presence of God that has never departed from you, the divine essence that lives, moves, and breathes as your very life. The great illusion of humanity is separation, the belief that we stand apart from our source. Yet the truth is that the presence has never been absent. It abides within the heart of every being, waiting only for recognition. To acknowledge the Christ within is not to invite something new into existence, but to awaken to what has always been. This inner recognition begins with stillness, for only in silence can one perceive what words cannot convey. The Christ does not come through sound or vision, but through awareness, the deep realization that I and the Father are one. The mind, accustomed to duality, seeks God as something outside, in temples, scriptures, and teachers. Yet the sacred mystery is that the same light which illumined the saints and prophets burns quietly within every soul. The moment we turn inward and acknowledge its presence, even in a whisper of faith, the veil of separation begins to thin, and peace enters like a soft dawn. To recognize the Christ within is to shift from doing to being. The world teaches that spiritual growth is achieved through effort, through striving, learning, or purification. Yet the divine self does not grow or change. It is already complete. The work lies not in becoming divine, but in realizing that we already are. This realization is not born of pride, but of humility, for it acknowledges that there is nothing of ourselves that is good except that which flows from the infinite. The ego says, "I will find God." The spirit answers, "You cannot find what has never been lost." Acknowledgement transforms consciousness. When you pause throughout the day to remember, the Christ is here, within me, within all, you invite divine awareness into every activity. Washing dishes, walking through a crowded street, or speaking with another, each becomes a sacred act when performed in remembrance. This awareness dissolves judgment, for if the Christ is in all, how can one condemn? It softens the heart and opens the eyes to the beauty that is hidden beneath appearances. Every person you meet becomes a reflection of the same light you carry, and every circumstance, no matter how ordinary, becomes an altar where divine presence reveals itself. The Christ within is not bound by religion, creed, or tradition. It transcends every doctrine and belongs to no name. It is the universal essence of life, the Word made flesh in every being. To acknowledge it is to rise above the narrow walls of belief and enter the boundless realm of spirit. You begin to see that holiness is not confined to sacred places or hours, but fills the very air you breathe. This understanding brings freedom, for no longer do you depend on outer conditions to feel the presence of God. The divine is where you are, as you are, in this very breath. In moments of sorrow or confusion, remembrance of the Christ within becomes a healing balm. When the outer world crumbles, when human strength falters, turn inward. There, beneath the turmoil, lies a still center, untouched by pain or fear. This is the Christ, the unshaken core of peace that no circumstance can destroy. To dwell in that awareness is to live from the foundation of eternal safety. The storms may rage around you, but the center remains calm, radiant, and sure. Every time you return to that awareness, you strengthen your connection to divine reality and weaken the illusion of separation. Acknowledging the Christ within is an act of faith that matures into knowing. At first, it may be a concept repeated in thought, but with persistence, it becomes a living experience. As you rest more often in inner stillness, the awareness grows not as an emotion, but as a subtle certainty. You begin to sense that every heartbeat is an echo of divine rhythm, every thought illuminated by a higher intelligence. The Christ becomes not an idea, but the very consciousness by which you live, move, and perceive. This recognition naturally extends to others. When you behold another, not as a struggling human personality, but as the living expression of the same divine life, you begin to love without condition. Compassion arises not as effort, but as the spontaneous response of truth, recognizing itself. You can no longer hate, for hatred would be self-denial. You can no longer fear, for fear cannot exist where unity is known. Thus, the acknowledgement of the Christ within becomes the foundation of peace in relationships, in communities, and in the world. To live in constant remembrance of the inner Christ is to walk through life with a quiet radiance. You no longer need to seek signs, for the presence itself becomes your guide. You act, not from human reasoning, but from divine inspiration that flows naturally when you are aware of your oneness with God. Every need is met, not through outer striving, but through inner alignment. You become a transparency for divine love to express itself not as something you do, but as what you are. The Christ within, once acknowledged, becomes the silent teacher, the comforter, the light that never fades, revealing through you the eternal harmony of the infinite. Communion is the sacred art of resting in the presence until there is no longer a sense of I and thou, but only the still awareness of being. It is not communication in the sense of words or thoughts exchanged between two beings. It is the merging of consciousness with its divine source. To enter this communion, one must move beyond the limits of intellectual prayer and allow the heart to become the altar where the infinite meets the finite. It is in this interior stillness that the true relationship between the soul and God is realized not as separation bridged by devotion, but as unity revealed through silence. The beginning of communion often feels like quiet, waiting. The mind, restless by nature, may struggle against the stillness, seeking to fill it with petitions or affirmations. Yet communion is not about asking or affirming, it is about being. The more one strives to create an experience, the further it slips away. The key is surrender, a gentle letting go of mental activity, a release of every effort to reach God. When the thoughts subside and the emotions quiet, awareness opens like a flower to the light. In that openness, the divine makes itself known, not as something outside, but as the very life within. In true communion, there is no longer the sense of a person seeking something greater. There is only the awareness that life itself is speaking, listening, and being through you. It is a silent recognition that every breath, every heartbeat is an expression of the Infinite One. Prayer becomes not words but stillness. Meditation becomes not thought but being. This is the moment when time stands still and eternity reveals itself as the present. In this sacred awareness, the soul experiences its natural state, peace without opposite, joy without cause, love without object. Communion is not achieved through human discipline but through divine grace. Yet grace is drawn to humility. When the heart bows inwardly and confesses its helplessness to reach God through effort, the divine presence rises like a tide. It is as though the moment you cease to seek, the beloved steps forward. The presence that seemed distant reveals itself to have never been apart. You realize that the separation existed only in thought, not in reality. The soul does not travel to meet God. It awakens to the truth that it has always been within God. The experience of communion cannot be forced, but it can be invited. One invites it through love, through the pure desire to be still and to know. When you sit in silence, not for reward, not for guidance, not for peace, but simply to rest in the awareness of the divine, the veil begins to lift. In that sacred quiet, there is no asking and no answering, for the two have become one. The language of communion is not speech but silence, and within that silence there is understanding more profound than words could ever convey. In daily life, communion can become a continuous state. It is not confined to moments of meditation or solitude. It can be carried into every act, walking, working, listening, loving. When you remember that the presence is within and around you, life itself becomes prayer. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to recognize the divine shining through form. Even the simplest tasks take on a quiet holiness, for they are done in awareness of the eternal presence. This is the essence of living communion, a consciousness so awake to spirit that no moment is apart from God. Communion dissolves fear, for fear arises only in the sense of separation. When you know yourself to be one with the infinite, what remains to fear? The heart becomes anchored in peace, untouched by the shifting conditions of the world. Even in the midst of outer turmoil, you can rest inwardly in the silence that never moves. That silence is not emptiness, it is fullness, alive with the substance of spirit. It holds you, sustains you, renews you. It becomes the secret place of the Most High, where no evil can touch and no sorrow can abide. Through communion, guidance unfolds naturally. It does not come as a command or a voice from without, but as a gentle impulse within a knowing without thought. The mind, when purified of noise, becomes the clear mirror through which divine wisdom reflects. Decisions arise effortlessly, for they are not born of reasoning, but of intuitive clarity. In this way, the soul becomes the instrument of divine will, acting not from compulsion, but from inner harmony. Every movement, every word, every silence carries the fragrance of divine order. As communion deepens, one begins to sense that God is not something to reach, but something to reveal. The more one abides in stillness, the more transparent the self becomes, allowing the light of spirit to shine unobstructed. Life becomes a living prayer, not spoken, not thought, but lived. And in this state, you discover the highest truth, that there was never a need to find God, for you were never outside of the divine. Communion is the unveiling of this eternal oneness, where the listener and the speaker are the same, and the silence itself is the voice of God. Trust is the invisible bridge between human uncertainty and divine assurance. It is not born of logic, for logic demands proof, and spirit gives only knowing. To trust the unseen guidance is to rest in a faith that transcends reason, a quiet conviction that even when all appearances suggest absence, the presence is working, unfolding, and directing all things toward good. This trust does not mean blindness. It is the vision of the heart, the perception that senses harmony where the eyes see chaos. The human mind longs for control. It measures safety by predictability, and it fears the unknown. Yet the divine path cannot be measured, for it moves beyond the limits of human planning. When we surrender control and lean upon the inner presence, we step into a current that knows its own direction. The river does not ask the stone for permission to flow. It moves with power and grace toward the sea. So too does divine life move through us when we cease to resist. Trust is the letting go of resistance, the willingness to be carried by a wisdom greater than our own. At first, this trust feels like stepping into darkness. The senses offer no proof, and the mind trembles in uncertainty. But as we persist in quiet confidence, something begins to shift. We start to perceive a subtle order, a pattern of grace working beneath the surface of events. Circumstances that once seemed random reveal purpose. Delays become protection. Disappointments turn to blessings. Each moment of surrender deepens our awareness that nothing in divine law is wasted or misplaced. All unfolds in perfect rhythm, though we may not yet see the full design. Trust grows through experience. Each time we follow an inner prompting, that gentle nudge of intuition, and witness its wisdom, faith strengthens. The Christ within whispers softly, never demanding, always guiding. And as we obey these quiet impulses, confidence blossoms. We begin to see that the voice within never leads to harm, never contradicts peace, never fails to sustain us. In moments when logic cries out for control, the Spirit's whisper says, "Be still, I am here." To trust is to obey that whisper, to act upon peace rather than fear. The practice of trust calls for patience, for divine timing is not human timing. The mind, anxious for results, demands quick answers. The spirit unfolds truth like dawn, gently, gradually, in its appointed hour. Impatience clouds hearing, trust clears it. When we wait in serenity, we align with the rhythm of the infinite. Just as the seed must rest in darkness before breaking into light, our understanding must often rest in silence before revelation appears. In this resting, we learn that faith is not believing that everything will go as we wish, but knowing that everything will go as it should. To trust the unseen guidance is to cultivate inner listening. This means turning from the clamoring voice of the world to the still, steady tone of spirit. The outer world is filled with noise, opinions, fears, urgencies, but the divine voice speaks only in calm assurance. It never argues or shouts, it simply is. When we quiet our inner turmoil, we discover that the guidance we sought was never absent. It was drowned out by the noise of our own anxiety. The more we rest in silence, the more clearly we hear that still small voice saying, "I am the way." This trust also demands courage, the courage to follow inner direction even when others do not understand. Divine guidance often leads through paths unseen by reason or approved by society. Yet the soul that trusts the presence walks in quiet confidence, unmoved by outer judgment. For such a one knows that the inner voice speaks from a wisdom that cannot err. The Christ within never leads to confusion, only to deeper peace. Therefore, if a direction arises from stillness, carries no fear, and leaves the heart tranquil, it may be followed, even if it contradicts human expectation. Trust brings freedom. The more we rely upon the inner presence, the less we are bound by fear of loss or failure. We cease to live by appearances, by what others do, or by what circumstances suggest. Instead, we live by grace. The need to control outcomes fades, replaced by a quiet assurance that all things are held in divine order. This freedom allows love to flow without fear, action to arise without tension, and service to be offered without expectation. Life becomes effortless, guided not by personal will, but by the invisible hand of spirit. In time, this trust matures into knowing. We no longer say, "I hope God will guide me," for we have seen that guidance in every breath, every turn, every silence. The unseen becomes the only reality worth trusting. We recognize that divine wisdom operates ceaselessly, regardless of our awareness. Even when the path seems uncertain, the presence remains unfailing, guiding each step toward fulfillment. To trust this unseen guidance is to rest in the heart of life itself, to walk through the mystery of existence with serenity, knowing that every moment, seen and unseen, is carried by the eternal love that never errs. Expression is the natural flowering of divine awareness. When the Christ within has been heard, felt, and trusted, its radiance cannot remain hidden. It seeks to move through thought, word, and deed, transforming every ordinary moment into a living expression of the presence. To hear the inner voice is sacred. To live, it is holiness. The divine does not speak only for our comfort or understanding, but that it might manifest through us, that its love, wisdom, and peace may find form in the world. Expression, therefore, is not performance or effort. It is the spontaneous outpouring of inner realization into visible life. When one begins to live from this inner awareness, actions take on a quiet grace. There is no strain to be good, no deliberate attempt to appear spiritual. The Christ within expresses itself effortlessly, like fragrance from a flower or light from a flame. It does not struggle to shine, it simply is. The individual who abides in this awareness becomes a transparency for divine qualities. Love flows naturally into kindness, wisdom into right action, peace into calm strength. What once required discipline now arises as joy, for the motive has shifted from self to spirit. Expression begins in consciousness. Before any act or word, there is the silent knowing of oneness. In this awareness, there is no separation between the inner and outer, between meditation and living. The same presence that speaks in stillness, acts through the hands, walks through the feet, speaks through the lips. The individual becomes an instrument, but not a passive one, rather, a conscious partner in creation. This is the true meaning of letting God live through you. You no longer think, "What should I do?" Instead, you rest inwardly and allow the divine impulse to move you. Each action becomes an expression of divine will, not by command, but by inner harmony. To express the inner Christ is also to embody compassion. When awareness of unity deepens, the suffering of another can no longer be viewed as separate from oneself. Compassion becomes the natural language of spirit. It may express through a gentle word, a silent prayer, a helping hand, or simply a listening heart. Every expression of kindness becomes an act of divine service, for it reveals the love that flows ceaselessly within all creation. In this way, expression is not limited to outward deeds. Even the attitude of the heart radiates blessing. Living in expression also means living truthfully. The Christ within cannot dwell in hypocrisy or fear. To express divine life, one must have the courage to be authentic, to speak truth in love, to live integrity quietly, and to let the inner voice guide even when it leads against convention. The divine does not ask for pretense or piety, only sincerity. When one is inwardly aligned with the presence, truth becomes effortless. Words carry power, not because they persuade, but because they are rooted in the authority of spirit. Such words heal, uplift, and restore, for they are not human opinions but divine utterances clothed in human sound. Expression also manifests as peace. The one who lives in awareness of the Christ radiates calm wherever they go. Even without words, their presence brings comfort, for it carries the vibration of the infinite. Like still waters reflecting the sky, the peaceful soul mirrors divine serenity to the world. This peace does not depend on outer harmony. It remains unshaken amid turmoil. It is the silent testimony of realized truth, the living proof that God is here, now, within all things. Through this peace, others are drawn to their own inner stillness, and the circle of divine expression expands. To live as an expression of the inner voice is to surrender personal ambition. The ego seeks recognition, spirit seeks revelation. The Christ within does not desire to be admired, but to be made known. It uses the individual as a vessel through which divine love flows to all. When self-interest fades, the heart becomes open, and divine abundance begins to move freely. Giving and receiving become one act, for what is shared from spirit returns multiplied. This law of divine expression ensures that nothing given in love is ever lost. It is absorbed into the eternal rhythm of givingness that sustains the universe. Expression must also be constant. The inner voice does not speak for moments of prayer alone, but for the entirety of life. Every word, every action, every thought is an opportunity to reveal the divine nature. This constancy is not effortful but natural for one who abides in awareness. Whether facing challenge or joy, success or failure, the same peace flows forth. The outer world may change, but the inner source remains steady. Through such constancy, one becomes a channel of blessing, a living sermon of love without words. In expressing the Christ within, life becomes service, not as duty but as delight. Each day becomes an unfolding of divine creativity, a chance to reveal more of the infinite through the finite. The heart that lives in this awareness no longer seeks reward or recognition, for it has found fulfillment in being a vessel of grace. The voice once heard in silence now sings through every gesture of love, every quiet act of understanding, every breath of peace shared with the world. And so, in the quiet sanctuary of your own being, the journey returns to its beginning, the realization that the voice you sought has always been speaking, not in thunder or command, but in the gentle pulse of life itself. The Christ within is not a visitor. It is the eternal presence that lives, breathes, and moves as your very existence. To hear, it is to awaken to your true identity, to know that the divine and the human are not two, but one. Let the 5 steps become not a method, but a rhythm, the natural movement of spirit within you. Be receptive, that the stillness may open. Acknowledge the presence, that illusion may fade. Enter communion, that silence may reveal its fullness. Trust the unseen, that peace may lead your path. And express the light, that the world may glimpse through you the beauty of the infinite. Each moment you live in awareness of this inner voice, the ordinary becomes sacred, and the fleeting becomes eternal. You will find that there is nothing to attain, nothing to prove, for all that is divine already abides within. Simply listen, simply rest, simply allow, and the Christ within will speak through your heart in words unspoken, guiding your days with a wisdom that never fails and a love that never ends. Have you ever prayed with all your heart, only to be met with deafening silence? Have you found yourself wondering if your most heartfelt prayers are simply disappearing into the vastness of space, unheard and unanswered? This spiritual disconnection is perhaps the most painful experience for anyone seeking a genuine relationship with Christ. But what if I told you that the problem isn't that Christ isn't speaking? It's that we've been taught to listen in entirely the wrong direction. This fundamental misunderstanding has kept countless sincere believers trapped in a cycle of spiritual frustration. We strain our spiritual ears toward the heavens, desperately hoping to catch a whisper from beyond, while all along the divine voice we seek has been speaking from within us. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, relationship breakdown, or financial disaster, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging for guidance, yet feeling that Christ's voice remains frustratingly silent or unclear. The revolutionary truth I'm about to share with you today doesn't just transform your prayer life, it completely reconstructs the very foundation of your spiritual journey. The kingdom of heaven that Scripture speaks of is not some distant realm waiting for us after death, or accessible only to spiritual elites. It is, as Christ himself revealed, a state of consciousness that exists within you at this very moment. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with prayer, spiritual guidance, and divine communication. When you truly grasp that hearing Christ's voice isn't something you need to strain for, but rather recognize as already present within the very essence of your being, your spiritual practice transforms from desperate pleading to joyful communion. Imagine waking each morning with an innate awareness of divine guidance flowing naturally through your consciousness. Picture approaching life's challenges not with anxiety about making the right decision, but with a quiet confidence in the still, small voice that never stops speaking within you. This isn't wishful thinking or some new age concept. It's the profound reality that Christ himself taught when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." What would your relationship with God look like if you stopped straining to hear a distant voice and instead awakened to the divine whisper that has been speaking within you all along? The transformation begins with recognizing a profound truth that changes everything about how we approach our spiritual lives. The transformation begins with what I call the practice of presence, the first crucial step toward hearing Christ's voice with remarkable clarity. This isn't about complicated meditation techniques or esoteric rituals that only spiritual masters can achieve. It's about developing a continuous awareness of the divine kingdom that already exists within you, waiting to be recognized. This awareness becomes the foundation for a profound spiritual transformation that ripples through every aspect of your life. The journey begins with your first waking moments each day. Tomorrow morning, before your feet even touch the floor, pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, the kingdom of heaven is within me right now. Christ's consciousness is my true nature. If these insights about hearing Christ's voice have resonated with you, hit subscribe to join our growing community of spiritual seekers. We're exploring practical ways to recognize divine guidance in everyday life. This tiny decision creates ripples that extend far beyond that moment, establishing a mindset that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. Behind the scenes of every spiritual breakthrough is this fundamental shift in awareness. You're not creating something new. You're recognizing what has always been present, an eternal truth that has been waiting patiently for your acknowledgement. This recognition acts like a tuning fork, adjusting your spiritual frequency to align with divine communication that's already broadcasting within you. The journey toward clearer spiritual hearing continues throughout your day. Whether you're driving to work, sitting in a meeting, or preparing dinner, these ordinary moments become sacred opportunities to practice presence. A brief pause, a quiet breath, a simple acknowledgement. Christ is speaking within me now. Now I want to go even deeper into what might be the most overlooked truth on the spiritual path. The hidden insight that most seekers miss is surprisingly simple, yet radically transformative. Consistency matters infinitely more than intensity. This revelation contradicts much of our cultural programming about spiritual growth, where we're often led to believe that dramatic spiritual experiences are the primary pathway to transformation. The impact of 5 minutes of presence practice daily will far outweigh occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. Your spiritual receptors are being fine-tuned through regular, gentle adjustments rather than occasional intense overhauls. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a fire hose. Throughout your day, especially during challenging moments, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the decision points where this practice reveals its power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond material appearances. The mindset shift happens gradually but unmistakably. You'll begin noticing subtle revelations at first. A deeper peace in stressful situations, unexpected clarity about persistent problems, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These insights unfold naturally as you consistently return to the awareness that Christ's voice isn't something you need to search for. It's the very essence of your consciousness. If you've ever experienced even a fleeting moment where divine guidance suddenly became crystal clear amid life's chaos, write in the comments, "I've glimpsed the inner voice." The journey of hearing Christ's voice extends beyond dedicated prayer time into every aspect of daily living. The beauty of this practice lies in its practical application, especially during life's inevitable challenges. Consider how differently you might approach an unexpected traffic jam when you pause to recognize the divine presence within you. That brief moment of recognition creates a sacred space where impatience can dissolve and divine guidance can emerge. This shift isn't about ignoring practical realities, but about viewing them from a higher perspective. When a colleague criticizes your work, your natural impulse might be defensive reaction or internal shame. But pausing for even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom allows you to access a wisdom that transcends the immediate emotional response. The truth that exists beyond material appearances reveals itself, offering insights that would otherwise remain hidden behind reactive patterns. The revelation that gradually unfolds is profound. Challenges aren't obstacles to your spiritual journey, but catalysts for deeper recognition. Each difficulty becomes an opportunity to tune your spiritual receptors more precisely to the frequency of divine guidance. Behind every obstacle is an invitation to remember who you truly are. Now I want to explore one of life's most challenging battlegrounds for maintaining this awareness: your physical health. When symptoms appear, whether a minor discomfort or a serious diagnosis, our conditioned response typically follows a predictable pattern: panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. This natural reaction often drowns out the very spiritual guidance we need most. The second step in our journey involves approaching health challenges with a transformed mindset. Instead of allowing fear to dominate your consciousness, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness and divine perfection. This recognition creates a sacred space where Christ's voice can speak clearly about your well-being. Please understand, this approach isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The inner journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual awareness and appropriate action. When facing health concerns, your first decision point becomes pivotal. Will you react from fear or respond from spiritual awareness? Think about someone with chronic pain who's been told they'll simply have to live with their condition. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole, regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for hearing divine guidance that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. The blueprint for healing emerges from this transformed awareness. Every medical decision, every treatment option, every day lived with physical challenge becomes informed by both practical wisdom and the inner voice of Christ, speaking wholeness and peace. This integration represents the essence of true spiritual healing, not a rejection of physical reality, but an elevation of consciousness that can transform how we experience it. If you've experienced moments where inner peace arrived precisely when you faced a health challenge, share in the comments. Wholeness speaks within. Now I want to explore another area where anxiety often drowns out Christ's voice: your financial life. Financial concerns trigger our deepest fears about survival and security, creating so much static that divine guidance becomes nearly impossible to discern. Money worries can cloud our spiritual receptivity like few other challenges, keeping us trapped in cycles of scarcity, thinking, and fearful decision-making. The hidden truth behind financial freedom isn't about the numbers in your bank account, but about the awareness in your consciousness. From kingdom perspective, you recognize that divine substance is infinite and omnipresent. Your experience of supply is primarily a reflection of your consciousness, not external economic conditions. This profound mindset shift allows you to make practical financial decisions from a place of clarity and trust rather than scarcity and panic. When unexpected expenses arise or income decreases, your first response isn't fear, but a return to the awareness that Christ's voice is speaking guidance even now in this circumstance. Consider how different your financial journey might be if you approached every money decision as an opportunity to hear divine wisdom rather than a source of anxiety. This doesn't mean ignoring practical budgeting or financial planning. It means bringing a different quality of presence to these activities. The transformation often begins subtly. Perhaps you notice less emotional reactivity when bills arrive, or unexpected opportunities for provision appear in ways you couldn't have orchestrated yourself. These aren't coincidences, but revelations of what becomes possible when you position yourself to hear Christ's voice regarding provision. Now, I want to explore the evidence that emerges as this consciousness transformation unfolds in your life. The signs are often subtle at first, easily missed if you're looking for dramatic spiritual fireworks. You might notice less emotional reactivity when challenges arise, a growing ability to pause before responding to difficult situations, unexpected solutions appearing precisely when needed. These manifestations aren't random coincidences, but the natural blueprint of what unfolds when your consciousness aligns with divine reality. The impact extends beyond specific circumstances to transform the very quality of your daily experience. A quiet confidence begins replacing chronic worry. A sense of being divinely guided supersedes the pressure to figure everything out yourself. The journey of transformation unfolds uniquely for each person, but certain patterns emerge consistently. Many report experiencing an inexplicable peace amid circumstances that would have previously triggered anxiety. Others describe moments of surprising clarity about decisions that had seemed hopelessly complex. Still others notice synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that provide exactly what's needed at precisely the right time. Behind the scenes of these experiences is a simple shift in awareness. You've positioned yourself to hear Christ's voice by recognizing the kingdom within, and that recognition naturally produces evidence in your external experience. These signs aren't the goal of the practice, but rather confirmation that you're aligning with a deeper reality than material appearances suggest. If you've noticed any of these subtle transformations beginning in your own life, moments of unexpected peace, surprising guidance, or provision appearing in ways you couldn't have planned, share in the comments. I'm seeing the evidence. The fourth step in hearing Christ's voice clearly emerges in what might be our most complex arena: relationships. Think about it. Our connections with others often become the very battlegrounds where divine guidance is most difficult to discern. We approach relationships seeking validation, security, or fulfillment from others, creating a dynamic where our spiritual receptors become clouded by emotional needs and expectations. Subscribe to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. Each video translates profound spiritual truths into practical steps you can implement immediately in your daily walk with Christ. Kingdom consciousness transforms this relational landscape completely. When you recognize Christ's presence speaking within yourself, you naturally begin perceiving it in others as well. This shift doesn't magically make relationship challenges disappear, but it provides an entirely different foundation for navigating them. The revelation here is profound. Every relationship becomes a mirror reflecting aspects of divine truth, even when that reflection appears distorted by human limitation. Consider how this plays out in everyday interactions. When your spouse says something hurtful, your immediate impulse might be defensive reaction or withdrawal. But pausing to recognize the kingdom within creates a moment where you can hear guidance beyond the emotional trigger. The divine wisdom that emerges often reveals insights about both yourself and the other person that would otherwise remain hidden behind the veil of reactivity. When a friend disappoints you, the awareness of Christ's presence provides perspective that transcends the immediate situation. You begin recognizing that their behavior, however painful, doesn't define either their true nature or your worth. This mindset revolution transforms how you interpret and respond to relationship dynamics at the deepest level. The catalyst for relationship transformation isn't finding perfect people, an impossible quest that leads only to disappointment. It's developing perfect listening, the ability to hear Christ's voice speaking through even difficult interactions. Behind the scenes of every relationship breakthrough is this fundamental shift from reaction to response, from emotional reactivity to spiritual receptivity. This framework extends beyond intimate relationships to every human connection. Workplace conflicts, family tensions, even brief encounters with strangers become opportunities to hear divine wisdom rather than obstacles to peace. The blueprint for healthy relationships emerges not from external advice, but from internal guidance that becomes increasingly clear through practice. The impact of this transformed consciousness ripples through your entire relational landscape. You begin approaching others not as sources of approval or potential threats, but as fellow expressions of divine consciousness, even when they don't recognize this themselves. This doesn't mean ignoring harmful behavior or remaining in toxic situations. In fact, the guidance you receive may sometimes direct you to establish necessary boundaries or even end certain relationships. The difference lies in making these decisions from spiritual clarity rather than emotional reactivity. The journey of relationship transformation represents perhaps the most challenging and rewarding arena for hearing Christ's voice. Each interaction becomes a sacred opportunity to recognize divine presence beyond human limitation. Every conflict offers the chance to choose response over reaction, understanding over judgment, communion over separation. If you've experienced moments where pausing to recognize Christ's presence within completely transformed how you responded to a difficult relationship situation, share in the comments, from reaction to response. Now I want to explore what might be the most overlooked accelerator in developing clear spiritual hearing, the power of community. While inner recognition is ultimately a personal journey, seeking spiritual community becomes essential as your awareness deepens. Finding others who understand this practice creates an environment where your receptivity to Christ's voice can expand exponentially. The hidden dynamic at work here differs fundamentally from conventional social connections. Unlike groups formed around shared interests or activities, authentic spiritual community provides a context where inner recognition is valued, supported, and multiplied through shared experience. When multiple people practice presence together, the collective field of awareness often reveals guidance that might remain obscure to any individual. Think of it as spiritual acoustics. Certain environments naturally amplify sound, while others dampen it. Similarly, some relational contexts naturally enhance your ability to hear divine guidance, while others create interference that makes clarity nearly impossible. The cultivation of spiritual fellowship isn't about religious obligation, but strategic positioning for clearer reception. This doesn't require abandoning existing relationships or joining formal organizations. Sometimes spiritual community forms organically around kitchen tables, in living rooms, or through meaningful conversations with just one other person who shares your commitment to presence. The essential element isn't the structure, but the shared awareness that creates a sanctuary for deeper listening. The revelation that emerges through authentic spiritual community often surpasses what any individual might discover alone. Insights are amplified, blind spots illuminated, and divine guidance confirmed through the resonance of multiple hearts tuned to the same frequency. This multiplication effect represents one of the most powerful catalysts for spiritual growth available to us. Now I want to explore the fifth step in hearing Christ's voice clearly, one that transforms one of the most significant portions of your waking hours, your work life. For many people, professional environments represent spiritual dead zones where divine guidance seems particularly difficult to access. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, and performance expectations creates a frequency of anxiety that drowns out the still small voice within. Kingdom consciousness revolutionizes this dynamic by transforming work from mere employment to spiritual expression. When facing workplace challenges, the simple practice of pausing to recognize the divine reality beyond material appearances creates space for unexpected insight and guidance. The mindset transformation here is profound. Your job becomes more than just earning a living. It becomes a canvas for expressing divine qualities. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult colleague interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. The behind-the-scenes reality of truly innovative work involves this shift in awareness. The most groundbreaking creative solutions rarely emerge from stressed, constricted consciousness. They flow naturally when we access the unlimited intelligence that speaks within kingdom awareness. This isn't abstract philosophy, but practical transformation that affects productivity, problem-solving, and professional fulfillment. Consider how different your work experience might be if you approached each task not as a separate entity struggling through challenges alone, but as a living expression of divine consciousness. If you've experienced moments where bringing spiritual awareness to your workplace completely transformed how you approached a project or challenge, share in the comments. Work becomes worship. You'd approach obstacles from abundance rather than scarcity, from creative possibility rather than limitation, from spiritual partnership rather than isolated struggle. The impact extends far beyond measurable metrics to transform the very quality of your daily experience. Now I want to explore what might be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of hearing Christ's voice clearly. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypassing. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. The revelation at the heart of this peace is profound. When you position yourself to hear Christ's voice clearly, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, but a foundational frequency of tranquility that transcends particular situations. This peace becomes your anchor through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. The blueprint for this transformation emerges naturally as you continue recognizing the kingdom within. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. Divine guidance flows with remarkable clarity when your consciousness isn't clouded by anxiety. Consider a woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years, who faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response. Not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing beyond intellectual understanding that the divine voice that had proven faithful in smaller challenges remained accessible even through life's darkest valley. This peace that transcends understanding becomes the foundation for hearing Christ's voice with unprecedented clarity. The mindset revolution here isn't about suppressing natural emotions or denying difficult realities. It's about discovering a deeper dimension of awareness that remains unshaken regardless of surface turbulence. Now I want to reveal what might be the most challenging aspect of hearing Christ's voice with greater clarity. The pathway to this transformation requires something that most spiritual seekers in today's world are unwilling to give: consistent commitment regardless of immediate results. Let's be honest about what this journey truly demands. This isn't a weekend workshop or 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. The breakthrough comes through daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate effects. Faith in spiritual truth, when material appearances seem to contradict it completely, and patience through what can be a painfully gradual development process. The hidden dynamic at work here is countercultural in almost every way. Some who begin this practice experience dramatic breakthroughs within weeks or months. Others work diligently for years before significant changes appear visibly in their experience. The decisive factor isn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence. The willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. If you're committed to patient persistence on this journey of hearing Christ's voice more clearly, even when immediate results aren't visible, write in the comments, "I choose the path of persistence." Think about the most meaningful transformations in your life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change, the kind that reshapes your entire experience, almost always unfolds through consistent small shifts rather than dramatic singular events. Hearing Christ's voice with greater clarity follows this same developmental arc. Each recognition creates subtle adjustments in your spiritual receptors, gradually tuning you to divine frequency with increasing precision. The blueprint for success here involves embracing what modern culture rejects entirely: the wisdom of patience. Our society has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in virtually every domain, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revolution that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. Now, I want to offer perhaps the most liberating truth of this entire journey. You can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. The path to hearing Christ's voice more clearly doesn't require prerequisites or spiritual credentials. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special training or decades of spiritual study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there, and it will always be there. This insight contradicts much of our conventional spiritual programming. We've been conditioned to believe that divine communication requires elaborate preparation, special techniques, or advanced spiritual status. The revolutionary understanding that transforms this journey is recognizing that your ability to hear Christ's voice clearly isn't something you need to create through effort. It's something you simply recognize as already present. Think about the implications of this truth in your daily experience. The blueprint for transformation isn't about adding something new to your life, but removing the barriers to what already exists eternally within your consciousness. Your recognition doesn't create divine guidance, but reveals what has always been speaking beneath the surface of your awareness. The decision point you face in this moment isn't whether to begin an arduous spiritual journey requiring special resources or rare abilities. It's simply whether you'll acknowledge what already exists within you. This acknowledgement can begin with your very next breath. Regardless of your current circumstances, spiritual background, or perceived limitations, the practical pathway forward couldn't be simpler. What makes this approach to hearing Christ's voice so uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to become someone different or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. The journey toward clearer spiritual hearing isn't about becoming someone new, but about recognizing your original nature that has always existed beneath the layers of conditioning and fear. The journey of recognition doesn't happen in isolation. It naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. Spiritual truth was never meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. This sharing doesn't require becoming a teacher or preacher. It happens organically through your transformed presence in everyday relationships and situations. As you practice hearing Christ's voice more clearly through these 5 steps, you become a living example that quietly inspires others to begin their own practice of recognition. When you respond to challenges from kingdom awareness rather than reactive fear, you demonstrate a different way of being that others naturally notice. If you're beginning to recognize this kingdom within yourself today, write in the comments, "The kingdom awakens within me." As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that spiritual teachers have emphasized throughout the ages. The journey of hearing Christ's voice clearly isn't meant to be a solitary pursuit, but a shared awakening that ripples through our collective consciousness. Your recognition becomes permission for others to recognize the same truth within themselves. If these teachings about connecting with the kingdom within have resonated with something deep inside you today, I'd love to continue this exploration together. Each video on this channel explores practical ways to experience divine guidance more clearly through everyday challenges and opportunities. Subscribe to join our community of seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. The most beautiful part of this journey is that every person who embraces these practices becomes a living testament to the possibility of deeper spiritual connection. If today's message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, write in the comments, "The kingdom within awakens." Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in these insights about hearing Christ's voice more clearly, tap that like button, not for algorithms or metrics, but as a quiet acknowledgement that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a simple gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. There's a video right here about maintaining spiritual awareness through challenging circumstances that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to sustain divine connection even when external conditions seem to contradict spiritual truth. Until next time, remember that the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition.